Hey everyone, welcome to episode 20 of Food Culture Curious. On this episode, we have my friend Vanessa Connolly, who is a board certified renal dietitian, who talks to us all about her Caribbean food culture, as well as so many different reasons why healthcare professionals need to stop villainizing cultural foods. This was an awesome episode. I can't wait for y'all to hear it. Enjoy! Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. My name is Areli. I'm a registered dietitian on a mission to help healthcare professionals be more culturally inclusive with their nutrition recommendations. Today with us, we have Vanessa Connolly. She is the owner of Vanessa Connolly Nutrition LLC, an online CKD private practice based outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Her passion is to help people stress less about how to eat for their chronic kidney disease and help nourish bodies to improve overall health. Today, she's going to talk to us all about her food culture. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Super stoked.
Yes, I'm super happy. You're one of the Instagram dietitians that I've gotten to be friends with, and you've always answered all my questions. You're just awesome all around. So I'm really happy to have you on the show today.
Yes. I know I've met a lot of amazing dietitians on Instagram. So I'm so glad that we connected for sure.
Perfect. So we'll jump right into it. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about food and culture, if you identify with any particular food cultures.
Yes. So I identify with Caribbean. My parents grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. So although I was born and raised in the United States, my parents were born in Trinidad and Tobago. And then they moved over to DC when they were young and had all of us. So I grew up with Caribbean culture throughout my childhood. And so I have wonderful memories of cooking wonderful Caribbean meals with my mom and my dad and having like a big family affair. And it was always surrounded around food and music.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit about that. Your foods growing up, typical produce, starches, proteins.
Oh, yeah. So typical proteins were like chicken. I mean, it was some proteins that I was just like, I'm a little suspect, but my dad would like really encourage us to try like chicken, pig's feet, deer. And I was not really about all that, but chicken for sure was in everything. Saltfish is another one that we kind of grew up with as well that I really enjoyed having as a kid. And as far as produce, I mean, greens, we were doing kale, spinach, onions, garlic, a lot of greens and stewed veggies, making more of a puree. And then we would put that on top of rice and then on top of stewed chicken. And that was just our staple with just about most days of the week.
That's awesome. That sounds delicious. What are some really famous dishes from your culture?
So famous ones was fortunate to really try was kalo. And so that was the dish I was kind of telling you about where it's cooked down spinach. My mom would always put like extra like kale in it. And then she would either flavor it with like a crab leg, pig feet was mainly the thing, or like chicken feet. So that was like on top of the white rice with stewed chicken. And then we would always have like macaroni pie to go with it. Another one was like peas and rice. Peas and rice plain, peas and rice with fish, peas and rice with chicken. And that was really, really good. Bacon shark. And I was fortunate enough to try that when I was older. And I went to Trinidad with my parents to meet a lot of extended family that I had met since I was born. And so I tried it out over there. Roti is like the main popular staple in my family. And I feel like everywhere we go, it's always like roti with curried potatoes and chickpeas, and we would just sop up all the juices with the roti. Sometimes it would be with chicken, sometimes it would be without. And then our typical saltfish, and we would have it stewed with oil, like vegetable cooking oil, and stewed tomatoes and stewed onions. And I mean, we would just have that with like bread and butter, and we would sop up all the juices, and then we would I would have it just as is, and I would go back and put it on top of rice. So those were like my typical Trinidad staples. And my parents definitely made sure we had enough of that growing up.
Yeah, I know that the very produce heavy dishes. What were
Yeah.
some seasonings that you used to add flavor to that?
Oh, hands down, curry powder. It was like the biggest thing. We also use parsley, a lot of onion, a lot of garlic, green onions. Cumin was also good. But yeah, it was the most thing I can remember growing up was like curry powder.
And you
Yeah.
mentioned the vegetable oil. Is that typical?
Typical growing up, it was like, yeah, vegetable oil. And then as my mom got more health conscious, we switched over to canola oil. But yeah, it was like typical, like vegetable oil, vegetable shortening, the Crisco. And, we didn't really know any better when we were younger. But yeah, everything was basically like cooked in vegetable oil, cooked and
Gotcha.
fried.
Yeah, we did a lot of that. I mean, even when we make tamales, we still have to use some lard and things
Yeah.
in there, but it adds certain flavor to the foods.
It does. It really does. I mean, I wouldn't change it now that I'm like a dietitian. I'm like, go ahead and
Yeah.
cook that bad boy in vegetable oil.
Awesome. Did you have any favorite desserts?
So I wasn't really like a sweets person, but I remember having desserts around. The one thing for sure that I loved was a staple called sponge cake, and it was almost like a pound cake, but it was super super moist on the inside. So it had a nice little like crust on the outside, and you would bite into it. It was super soft. And I loved when like my mom would make it or my dad, and then when family would come over. Another one is like fried dough, fried bakes, and sometimes we would just put a little bit of sugar on top with some butter. Hot crust buns was very popular too. And I would just maybe sneak a couple bites because like I really wasn't a sweets person. And then around the holidays, we would always have a dish called sugar cake. And I would tear it up at that time because it was something that we never really had all year long, but around the holidays, it was always around. So we would eat it then.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your holidays. What were some typical dishes that you would see during the holidays specifically?
Yeah. So for Thanksgiving, we always did the turkey. And then we'd always throw in like our callaloo with our stewed chicken with rice, no matter what, with another pot of greens. So my mom would like cook down a whole bunch of kale and would stick, usually it was pig's feet or crab legs, but it was so, so good. We would always have that. For Christmas, it was a special treat because my dad would make homemade bread and homemade sweet bread. And so sweet bread would have the raisins and the coconuts and sometimes nuts, and he would just make it. And so we would always, I have three sisters. So there's four girls all together. And so when Christmas time would come, like we would kind of be waiting, like, where's the bread? Because my dad would make these amazing loaves and then it'd be gone by the time Christmas and New Year's was over. But I specifically remember like when we were younger, my mom would make her own roti. And so I can't tell you what the apparatus is called, but it was a little appliance where connect it to the side of the table and it was a grinder. So we would put the split peas on the top and we would grind it and then it would be at the bottom. My mom would make out the dough and I loved that because I felt like part of making something really amazing and just being able to help my mom cook these things. And so roti was something very special, especially around the holidays, around Christmas time. And then we'd always have it with like potatoes, curried potatoes, and curried chicken, curried potatoes, and chickpeas. And so Christmas time and the holidays, it's a big family affair. Like we have family from Trinidad that live in the States. So I have some family in New York and New Jersey and Maryland because I grew up in Maryland. So I had an aunt in Baltimore. And so they would all come either to our house or we would go travel to other people's houses in New York or Jersey and we'd just all be together. But it always surrounded
Oh,
around food.
that sounds really nice. Do you
Yeah,
feel like there are any particular foods that are associated with health?
that's a good question. Yeah. So my mom and my dad would do a lot of natural approaches. So when anyone would get sick, I mean, we would chop up a lot of garlic. So they would make these, not concoctions, but they would chop up a lot of garlic, ginger, kind of grind it up and make it into like a little paste or put it in, I guess it was water. I don't know. Or teas. That's what it was. It was teas. And we would drink that for just feeling, better if we had a sore throat or if we weren't feeling well. But those seem to be the ones that kind of really struck a chord. And then just making sure we have enough citrus, especially when we're not staying on top of having enough vitamin C, is what I kind of more so remember like growing up.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own traditions as far as what foods they think will help, build their immune system and bring them health.
Yeah.
So in my culture, in my house, it was always chicken soup and Gatorade. Like, this is gonna make you feel better.
Now, I will say, now that you said chicken noodle soup or chicken soup, my mom would make chicken broth, like from bouillon. I couldn't even tell you the brand, and it would be piping hot off the stove, and we would drink a little bit of that. And I loved it because it was super salty, but it was always garlic. Especially my dad, he's like, let's chop up some garlic. Like, let's inhale the steam coming from a pot because it's going to make everything better. And I'm like, okay.
So talk a little bit about how your love of food made you want to be a dietitian.
Oh gosh. I always saw food as a way to help people heal, and see that like everybody can enjoy food, their culture, and still live a healthy, productive life. And so I think I got more into that and how certain foods can be beneficial for certain things like blood pressure, kidney disease,
Mhm.
cholesterol. And so I really wanted to deep dive with that. And the fact that, I mean, we have family history of high cholesterol in my family. And I have some extended relatives that have like diabetes and high blood pressure. So I think I really wanted to be on this really good health track and learn more about nutrition for myself, and then also to help my family and friends and other people learn how to heal themselves with nutrition.
Yeah. And then from all the different ways you can be a dietitian, what do you feel attracted you to being a renal dietitian?
Good question. I think because I never knew that dietitians helped with patients on dialysis. And I really didn't know that until I was in college because I was originally a pre-med major and then I switched over to dietetics and originally thought, oh, we just sit here and like how to lose weight or how to do this and be on your way. And then it really opened my eyes. I think I took a course in college and then realized like, oh wow, there's a lot of other things that dietitians can do than besides working in the hospital. And it wasn't until I did my internship and I did my dialysis rotation that I was like, oh yeah, this is something that I can totally see myself doing and I feel like people don't really understand this unless you're a dietitian because it can be, renal is real clinical. And I love
Mhm.
clinical and I love analyzing labs and I love looking at trends and I love looking at medication interactions, but it's also community. And so I love building rapport with patients and so you get to learn your patients, you get to understand their struggles. And then that's when it hit me like everything that I was taught in my internship about how we supposed to educate our dialysis patients. I learned real quick, no, this is not the way to do that. I need to work with them. I need to work with especially those who are very culturally diverse and they were told like they can't have these things. And I'm like, I can't be that person to tell somebody they can't have because of, their chronic conditions. But when I first walked into that dialysis clinic, I mean, at first I was scared. I was like, wow, there's a lot of people that need kidneys and have kidney dialysis. But once I really got into it, I was like, I'm really passionate about it. And it's either, I think with any chronic disease, it's either you love it or you hate it. And I was just immediately drawn to it.
Same, big same.
Yeah.
Dietitians of color in general in the dietetic space. And then on top of that, the rare renal dietitians of
We're
color. So
unicorns,
I know,
baby.
yes, we are. I know you must see some of these challenges that your population faces. Would you mind talking a little bit about that, sharing that with other dietitians that may not really be as aware of our perspective?
Yeah. So the renal diet that most dialysis patients are on is very restrictive, right? And so a lot of it is foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains that are big staples in culturally diverse populations, mainly our brown and black communities. And I have seen so many people struggle because they were told they can't have, like, you know, curried potatoes and roti, or they cannot have their salsa with black beans and their tacos, and, not being able to enjoy like Asian cuisine because of the salt. And I'm just like, there's nothing left for anybody to eat when you take away somebody's culture. This is somebody's upbringing, their love, their joy. And so I feel like a lot of other dietitians who are not culturally inclusive, sensitive, don't really see how it can be hurting somebody that is people of color, culturally diverse. I don't think they see it that way. I see it when they are told they can't have these things. And when I come in and I sit down, and I know you've experienced this, when you sit with somebody, if I sit with somebody that's black or somebody of color and they see me, it's like they can relate. I'm here and I can sit and I can listen because I understand where they're coming from. Right. And so I talk with them more about their cultural background. Let's talk about their traditional foods. Let's talk about like what brings them joy, what foods bring them joy. And I think people miss the mark and they don't take the time to listen, just to sit and listen.
Mhm.
What lights them up, what brings them joy, what they enjoy having, and then working with them instead of telling them like, no, you can't have that, you know and we both know the renal diet, it sucks. And I don't want people to just live, eat like inflammatory foods, and it's just they're just relying on a very small amount of food, and that's no way to live. But I wish like doctors, nurses, other dietitians, just healthcare professionals can really take the time to understand somebody's cultural background.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a patient tell me this week she was having a high potassium, and she's like, "Oh, the doctor just walked over and told me I can't eat bananas and I can't eat oranges and I can't eat tomatoes and I can't eat this and I can't eat that." And I was just like, "Okay."
Yeah, yeah. It's like the not even a silent eye roll. It's like that, like, you know, we can break it down. Like, let's include it, girl. I think lights me up.
Absolutely. Yeah, a big thing that I want dietitians to know, and I know you want dietitians to know, is that, the portion matters, the concentration matters. It's not black or white. You can't just like eliminate it altogether, because then the patient's
Right.
not going to want to cooperate in either way. We're not going to see that change that we want to see. So I know you
Hmm.
post a lot about that, especially like that one sheet that they get from the hospital, and how that can be very frustrating. Tell us a little bit about what you do with your patients and how you help them.
So when I was working in dialysis, the first thing I ask, especially if they're new, is were you seen by a dietitian? And I can tell you with certainty, and I'm sure I would say 98% of those patients were not seen ever by a dietitian. So then I always would say, okay, tell me what are some things that you were told not to have, and then we can
Mhm.
go from there. So I tell them like we need to throw that in the garbage and we need to start fresh. And I always explain there's a lot of studies that have shown now that there are some benefits to including some more potassium rich foods, even for those that are on dialysis. But I want patients to understand all stages of CKD and especially dialysis. We can use food to improve like overall health, improve how you feel. And we know that dialysis patients get real drained. We know they get frustrated with, being told they can't have this and can't have that. And so I want to go in there and be their ally. I want them to know I'm working with you. I'm not working against you. So if there is something that they do want to and they were told not to eat and they trust me enough to tell me, because we all know there's patients that'll do whatever they want to do regardless of what you
Mhm.
say. But I'll work with them. So yeah, it's about that portion size, right? It's all I always say. It's always about portion. It's always about frequency. And so when we break down like how many milligrams of potassium or phosphorus or protein in a way that the patient can understand, I feel like they feel so much better about eating because now they see, oh, yes, it does contain potassium, but it's still okay for my body to enjoy potassium because I still need it, right? It's still needed
Mhm.
for blood pressure. It's still needed to help with lowering acidity. So I try to break things down in a way that people understand without being too academic. Nobody likes that. I'm always working with what they're currently eating. And I'm not here to judge. I'm not the food police. I get that, and I've seen that. I'll walk by with my lab report, and they all like pretend to sleep because they don't want to be bothered. But I'm just like, hey, I'm here to work with you. Something's off. Like, let's say phosphorus aside. Let's figure out what you've been eating, right? And so instead of saying like, I'm not going to say we're going to take this away. Let's be mindful of the portion size, right? Let's make sure
Mhm.
we're taking your binders consistently, with meals, with snacks. And I also get that could be very tedious because it's a lot of medications to take.
It's so much that they need to worry about. But
Yeah.
I hear you when you say that they think we're the food police, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the rest of the team sometimes think that we're the food police because I've
Mm-hmm.
had techs or nurses come up to me and be like, Mr. So and so is, eating this, or he ate a piece of chocolate, and I look at them and I'm like, the patient has been educated at this point. If that's what he wants to do, that he has the autonomy to do so. So it's not for
Yeah.
lack of education. I'm not just gonna go over and shake my finger in his face. Why are you eating chocolate?
I know. I know. I know. Yeah, they come to me too, and it's like, I'm gonna call you out right now. And I'm like, that doesn't serve anybody. And I'm like, please don't think that I'm walking around with like a badge, little baton ready to like hit somebody because they're eating chocolate or like potato chips. Like, come on, man. We're all adults.
Mhm.
They have been educated. They know. So, but yeah, that was one challenge I had because I always want to keep that line of communication open. I want to be there. And sometimes, like, when you work in a space for a very long time and you see your patients go through and you get to know them. So sometimes, like, when I would sit through in educations, it ends up being like a nice little like therapeutic session, because they just need to talk. And I'm always here
Yeah.
to listen. And I feel like most of my patients knew I'm not here to judge. It's a judgment-free zone. If you feel like you slipped up, like air quotes, let's talk about it. So that way we can get back on track the next time. But all I say is that we're all human and we all make mistakes and we all fall off the wagon. It's just we pick ourselves back up and we just keep it moving. And so you have to treat everybody like that.
Yes. I mean, even just this chat is therapeutic. Just
It
talking
is.
about everything we have to go through as renal dietitians, trying to fight to be culturally inclusive, and other people
Mhm.
don't see it that way. Oh,
Yeah.
that reminds me. There was this one post you did about, you were talking about how, we shouldn't be so restrictive with potassium as people think. And someone had commented, no, you're going to get somebody killed telling them things like that.
Yeah. At first I was like, oh my God, are you effing serious right now? Like, get out of here. And I'm like, for one, you don't follow me. Two, do you even have CKD? Like, do you honestly think I would go out on this social platform and tell people things to harm them? Like, and that's our problem, right? Like, there's so much food fear out there. And so, yeah, I mean, when you talk about potassium, you're going to get a little bit of heat for it, and that's fine. I'm here to put my foot on the ground and stand my ground and explain in a way that it's understanding. But I do feel like, yeah, some people understand and get it. And then there's so many people that just don't. And even with my private clients, it's like, oh, I thought I could have that. And I'm like, well, why not? You know? And so I always like portion size and how much milligrams of potassium it is, and then how much their range is. And then so in those early stages of CKD, most people don't need a potassium restriction, and most people do not eat the amount of potassium that they need for the day anyway. And even with dialysis, it would kill me when, like, I don't know about your doctors, but some of mine, they would do these recalls while I'd round with them, like what
Mhm.
did the patient have, whatever. And let's say somebody had a banana and the lady had a half a banana and then she just got like reprimanded in front of everybody. And I just was like, I think it's okay. Like, let's see other things that she's been eating in her diet. I mean, it could be very well the salmon that she had. I feel like there's a lot of people just don't realize fruits and veggies get villainized in this CKD
Mhm.
dietitian space, and people don't think about potassium additives in beverages and potassium in animal-based foods. And no one's telling anybody to avoid animal-based foods, right? So
Right.
the best thing to do is tell people to avoid fruits and veggies, which you don't want to do because our bodies, they thrive off of fiber and nutrients. Like, I don't want to take that
Mhm.
away, you know? So we're fighting the good fight, even in dialysis, in the trenches, and I have no problem like putting my foot down and being professionally stern when I need to be, because it's about the patients at the end of the day.
What's funny is that, so you know how I spoke at Fancy about potassium and phosphorus in cultural foods and
Yeah.
CKD? Okay, so originally I wanted to name the presentation "Stop Villainizing Our Cultural Foods."
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. But my co-presenter was like, maybe let's do something like more neutral. I was like, okay.
Yes. I will never forget this. And she was one of my favorite dialysis patients. She was Spanish speaking from Mexico. So I always needed to get a translator. And the doctor told her all the foods that she couldn't have anymore because of potassium. And so
Mhm.
we were rounding, we finished the call with a translator, and we walked off, and when I finished, she like flagged me down this way. So I walked over and I didn't get the translator back, but I got my phone and I did the Google Translate. And so we were talking. And so she started crying because she said, why did my doctor tell me, these are things that I love and these are things that I grew up with, and I got very emotional with her because it's like, again, doctors, people don't realize these foods are so much part of their culture. And you just tell them to stop eating these things. So then what? What are you going to tell them that what they can't have?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I spent a good deal of time just trying to help her unlearn some of those things and then working with her daughter-in-law who spoke English. And we all met in a conference room and we helped come up with a plan where she can still enjoy a lot of those foods and not run the risk of having too high of potassium. And she's, I remember she would have these moments where it would go up and down, but we figured out what it was and she cut back on it. So again, it's that listening and working with your patients to understand where their culture.
And that is the wonderful thing about dialysis or even CKD is that it's usually not a one-time thing, hopefully not a one-time thing, so that
Yeah,
you can play around with like the different foods and figure out, which is causing the issue. If it was even the foods at all. Sometimes it's not even the food.
exactly. I know. And then oh man, and trying to explain like it could be a non-diet issue. Like, I would say 90% of the time it's probably a non-diet issue, but what do I know? Yeah, yeah. And I had a client, she was from the Caribbean, and she was frustrated because she went to a hospital dietitian for CKD counseling, and they gave
Mhm.
her like the general freaking handout. And so she was living off of like the same foods, like 4 or 5 foods, and she was just
No.
terrified to go out to eat anywhere. And then we started working together, and things that she loved to make were these fried dough called bakes. And I was like, ma'am, this is part of my culture, and I know, and that brought me joy because my mom would make them up and she'd put them on the flat pan and we'd fry both sides and we would cut it. And something about that steam rising and then putting butter on it and watching that thing melt just brought me joy. And so her and I could relate because that brought her joy. And she's like, but I can't have them anymore because I was told I can't have them. And I said, who told you that? And she said, the hospital dietitian. And I'm like, well, the hospital dietitian is not a kidney dietitian. So that's the problem. And then I said, I said, you can enjoy these things, right? I was like, there's phosphate free baking powder. And she was
Mhm.
like, what? And I said, that's the reason why they probably told you that you can't have it, is because the phosphorus additives in the baking powder. I said, but there's phosphate free ones, you know? And I gave her the brand. I can't think of it right now. And she got it on Amazon. And 2 days later, it came and she made bakes. And she messaged me how happy she was that she was able to finally enjoy her bakes again, you know? And stuff like that brings me joy, you know? I was like, because you don't have to avoid these things. And I'm like, callaloo, like, yes, it's got spinach and kale, but those are things that are amazing for you. And the portion that you're having, and we figured out this is how much potassium it is, and your needs are like 3,500 for the day. That's a small dent, you know? And so when you put it in perspective where they can understand and they see, oh, okay, yeah, you know? And so, but by the end of our time together, like she was just a completely different person. She was just happy and she was
Yeah.
enjoying a lot that she could have, you know? And so I just wish
Mhm.
there was more unicorns like us out there trying to do the good fight.
It's nice seeing the relief in their eyes when
Mm,
they realize they don't have to give up their cultural foods.
hmm.
I really love hearing about those examples. I think those are great examples how we can help them. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Mhm.
Yeah. No worries. No
People
worries.
want to work with you. How can they find you?
So right now I'm on social media on Instagram. I do until I'm sorry, Facebook once I have the brain space to do so. But my IG handle is at plant focused kidneys is where you can find me. And you can also reach out on my website. It's www.plantfocusedkidneys.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this opportunity.
Yeah, and we'll talk more soon because we're collaborating on a little post for
I
Instagram. Mhm.
can't wait for that.
All right, everyone. Until next time. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/food culture curious. Or as always, you can support by sharing, following, or rating this podcast. Every click from y'all means the world to me. And now for a quick disclaimer. Food Culture Curious is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not take the place of medical advice from licensed healthcare professionals. If you need to seek medical advice, please speak to your healthcare provider. Thank you for listening.